Hello and welcome, and we're here at Holistic Investments, and I'm your host, Constantin Kogan, and I have an amazing guest today, Hyunsu Jung, who's the CEO of Hyperion DeFi. Hi, Hyunsu.
Hey, Constantine. Great to be here.
Great to have you here in our New York studio, and we've been planning to meet for a while after our first encounter, which was in Seoul, actually, in Korea. I was mesmerized by your presentation, and I'm very honored for you to be here. Without further ado, we're going to start the conversation about how you started being so young, how you started publicly traded company. Why did you pick specifically the ecosystem of Hyperliquid, which is very interesting to a lot of people. We've seen record of billions of new inflow capital come into Hyperliquid. We're going to talk about it, why it's happening specifically now. But before that, we need to throw a legal disclaimer that this content is for informational purposes only, and you should not construe any such information or other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or any other advice. So now, let's talk about just public markets and DeFi. What you're building, one of the first publicly listed DeFi native companies, right? Which is very exciting. To our knowledge, there's less than 200 of them, but I would say you're the first in a very specific niche. So why hasn't this been done before properly?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to the fact that no token digital asset has had the utility that Hype, the native token of the Hyperliquid blockchain, has had. So been in this space for a long time. Started with Bitcoin, Ethereum, DeFi Summer, Solana, and then everything that came after, especially with the DeFi applications. And when I first found Hyperliquid in 2023, I don't think anyone expected that it would be what it is today. And it really is tremendous to see how far it's come. But it was really in early 2025 when the Hyperliquid Labs team announced HIP3, which enables the creation of non-crypto perpetual markets. I was like, okay, there's an opportunity where if you stake 500,000 Hype, you can build a business on chain, and that is real DeFi, and you can do it as a public company. So saw the opportunity and took it.
So is Hyperion a treasury or a DeFi operating company disguised as one?
Yeah, we're definitely a DeFi company, and I know it's still very kind of hard for a lot of people to understand because it is a new sector, it's kind of a new industry, and the mainstream adoption is really happening now with institutional entities really starting to come in. But at the end of the day, right, a treasury usually just buys and holds the assets. What we're doing is deploying it very effectively to support the growth of the ecosystem and monetizing it. I think that's a value that is accretive to both the ecosystem, but also becomes a revenue generating company.
And yeah, by the way, revenue generating, we're going to talk about your exceptional results, which were publicly are available right now, quite soon. But first, I want to talk about you. As a founder, again, you're only 30 years old. I want to emphasize that it's very rare that a publicly traded company will be ran by a relatively young team. I spoke to your CFO, I spoke to other team members, and tell us about your background. First of all, I think it's important for our listeners to understand why you are capable of managing this company and making it success.
I think I was very fortunate in my career to have been given opportunities to do things beyond, I would say, what normal people are given the opportunity to do. So I first started my career in M&A at EY Parthenon. And I was basically leading one of the digital transformation work streams for the United Technologies carrier Otis separation. And at the time, we were looking at ways to improve efficiencies for the companies. And Ethereum was kind of somewhere down the list. And I was like, what the heck is this? It's down, 70, 80% from the previous cycle high, around $85. And so I got in, and in 2020, when DeFi Summer started, it's MetaMask, Aave, borrow lending, swapping. I was like, okay, there's something really interesting happening with permissionless finance. So in 2021, moved full-time to crypto at Dharma Capital, which is a $1 billion asset manager registered with the CFTC and the NFA. And while we were there, we did two things that were really, really important. Following the merge, moved $1 billion of ETH into validators, so creating a recurring revenue stream, which you see Bitmine and the other digital asset treasuries doing now on the public side. But what I'm personally most proud of is we deployed around $300 million worth of Filecoin, which is the data storage blockchain, to over 50 data center teams globally. And that was because Phil had the utility to be used to store and pledge data using the blockchain infrastructure. And what we found was you could compound returns using that asset. And it would have been a home run, except for the fact that Phil was challenging to find demand for on the other side. It was really to subsidize a lot of the activity. With Hyperliquid, that story is completely changed, and it creates a really immense opportunity for the asset holders and also for those building businesses.
Do you believe that you're still ahead of your time?
I think so. I mean, it's well, and I don't say in the way like myself or anything, but we were able to find ways to use blockchain technology in a way that hadn't been used before, which was using the on-chain infrastructure to basically eliminate counterparty risk, secure and see the transactions, see how much rewards they're generating, be able to unilaterally take control of that without taking risk to the assets, and generate real returns using on-chain infrastructure. And so with Hyperliquid, people are starting to see that come into the mainstream right now, but it hasn't really reached global awareness. And so in that sense, I think we are early.
What else did you understand about DeFi that, and specifically in the concept of monetization, that you think that other are still missing?
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to the fact about it's still in the early stages, right? Mm-hmm. When you talk about these days, right, a lot of the institutions are talking about equities on chain, real world assets. What blockchain are they going to land on? How are they going to be used? What is the official substrate and licenses and regulatory approach? Whereas with Hyperliquid, it's the synthetic representation, and it ties to the pricing oracle. So you really can do anything with it right now, but we want to build infrastructure that is institution focused and have it land on the Hyper EVM. And so I think there's an opportunity to build that, and that's what Hyperion DeFi is working with partners in the ecosystem to do right now.
Which is quite impressive. And if you were to explain DeFi monetization like you would to a hedge fund CIO or to someone who never been familiar with DeFi, right? How would you do that?
Yeah, it's a lot to say there. So I guess being on the private side before, a hedge fund can build a broad portfolio, right? Mm-hmm. Long, short equity positions, FX, commodities, and then taking positions based on macro or quantitative strategies. The interesting thing is we are not a hedge fund, but we are a DeFi company that is holding the base asset that we believe is the most valuable, Hype, and taking that utility to build products on chain, such as an HIP3 exchange, such as supporting aligned quote assets and building products on the Hyper EVM. And so it's more about the fact that you can use a balance sheet for a very specific purpose, but unlike hedge funds, normally you are actually supporting the growth of the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And so that effect means that Hype will gain more adoption, and we expect the price of the asset to increase. So we actually can grow the balance sheet and repeat that process, which I think is not really happening in any other industry. The funny thing is you can actually have these hedge funds, and we're seeing that now with off hours weekend trading. These guys will actually come and directionally position or hedge their own books on Hyperliquid on HIP3 because it's happening now.
Yeah, HIP3 markets is kind of revolutionizing the commodities, equities on chain, everything. It's 24/7. And we're seeing a real order book, where it was not available before. So if you were to explain again, Hyperliquid again, in a way that a person who never used it before, but they love trading, that's their passion, that's their life, how would you describe the value proposition of Hyperliquid?
So there's a lot to say there as well. I think Hyperliquid, their motto right now is the blockchain to house all of finance. Mm-hmm. So that I guess terminology is base level kind of hard to understand, but what it's really solved for is it is this unified layer where you will be able to trade any asset anytime with leverage, which is something that we've seen retail really appreciate. We saw the rise of zero data expiration options, and then prediction markets, parlays, those kinds of trends have been increasing. And so when you use a regular futures or margin account, like Robinhood, for example, you'll have to make $20,000 for margin for silver futures. Whereas with Hyperliquid, you can kind of do it in any size that makes sense, mm-hmm. and you get to play in that same competitive landscape. So I think that's a huge unlock. And then more importantly, Hyperliquid, we believe, has really solved for the abstraction. So a lot of it is actually being done through front-end builder codes like Phantom Wallet or Rabby Wallet or MetaMask, or these applications that people have on their devices. So really, market responses are happening a lot quicker, and individuals are basically able to position their views very quickly. So that's happening with not crypto assets like equities and commodities, but it's also going to move into prediction markets as well.
Yeah, the UI UX, by the way, is one of the most exceptional that I've seen on any exchange, right? So that's I think is also very important. And if we're talking about there's concept of triple dip, kind of Hype deployment, I think it's important to explain, what does it mean when you publicly state that you have staking, validator income, and DeFi monetization? Can you break it down for us?
Sure thing. So it kind of goes back to my historical background working in DeFi, but we realized the validator is really, really important, and not just for the sake of being able to earn staking rewards on our Hype, but allowing others to delegate their Hype to us, letting us participate in governance, which is really, really critical to the proper functioning of the Hyperliquid blockchain. And it becomes a recurring revenue source. And the great thing about being able to run your own validator is that We saw this trend with Ethereum as well, but when the price of the underlying asset appreciates, you're compounding the hype, but you're actually earning a higher rate of return, or like the APY changes because you're compounding over time. Mm-hmm. And so we think sometime in the future, hype is going to be trading higher because the supply keeps reducing due to the buybacks and other mechanisms, and that will functionally allow us to become a higher revenue generating company just using that product. However, we didn't choose to stop there. We also realized that hype that is staked can be delegated to HIP3 markets, can be used for trading fee reductions with new counterparties wanting to trade on Hyperliquid, and we can get paid in dollars for that. So it actually diversifies our position so that earnings are not only denominated in the base asset, but also in dollars, and it's agnostic to the price of hype and the performance of crypto markets, as we've seen with the huge attention to metals and now to oil. Those kinds of things we expect to continue over time.
So if someone from retail audience is watching, how can they participate and also somehow benefit from this?
So what we've seen with retail kind of newcomers or new entrants to crypto ecosystems, and we've seen this with the Ethereum ecosystem, Solana, Avalanche, and many that have come after, is in the 2021 cycle, the native or the base token would appreciate a lot in value, and then there would be a lot of the ecosystem applications that would just follow it. And now I think that cycle kind of structure has changed quite drastically, and we don't know if that'll necessarily be the same unless there is a lot of value to those protocols and they return that value to the base token. So the value proposition of HypeD or Hyperion DeFi equity is that not only are we providing exposure to hype, which is still relatively hard to access for institutions or for retail, we are really growing our revenue generating businesses, but we also have these embedded call options, right? Our partnerships with Kinetic, we own 0.2% of KNTQ. We currently own 1 mil of HPL of Hyperlend token, and we're also earning risk points and Silhouette. So it's a really great full stack way to get exposure, and it's kind of like trusting the experts to not only accumulate these positions, but use them for the good and the growth of the ecosystem.
You also have incredibly diversified revenue streams. It's 5 revenue streams, which is not a typical thing for DATs, right? So I want to break it down. So you have staking yield, validator commissions, yield enhancement, you have DeFi monetization, and ecosystem rewards. So if you can help us to understand, one by one, how does it represent the cumulative revenue stream, and how do you make decision which bucket do you deploy more?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So obviously it starts with hype. We stake all of our hype to the validator. Sometimes we use Kinetic's platform so we can get what's called liquid staking tokens, or the LSTs, which then we are then able to use for additional strategies like yield enhancement. And we're doing that both on and off chain to support native builders, but to also support market makers and other entities that are in supporting the Hyperliquid ecosystem. So that's called premium-based income. And then the DeFi monetization is HIP3 markets, the house product that we've developed, and we are continuing to see a lot of demand for that, which means that more and more trading activity is going to come to Hyperliquid. And the one that I'm personally most passionate about is the Hyper EVM or ecosystem rewards, which is partnering with what we believe to be the key future protocols in Hyper EVM and working together to grow them, taking a share of the revenue and making sure that we are creating a flywheel within that ecosystem. And the optionality that we have is actually what's most important, right? Because it's all foundationally using hype, we can identify if a certain strategy is not optimal at this certain time, move it to a different strategy, and then obviously with HIP4 coming and other primitives to come after, we expect that there will be continued ways to build a new business line. So we think 5 is actually the beginning. Triple dip is probably just the start.
That's going to be quadruple and then
yeah, right. Just keep dipping.
So maybe also help us to understand a little bit how to break it down, the rewards, how they're paid out, what are the risks there and what's the consistency?
Yeah, so it all varies upon each structure. So call it on the pure Hyper EVM ecosystem reward side, we're very diligent about the audits process and making sure that these smart contracts are very robust. We test everything ourselves first, but the long-term vision is, with risk vault, which is basically being able to run option strategy wheels, being able to get the best premium because it's all decentralized and multiple liquidity providers are offering their pricing. You're able to get the best execution. It's also not, the base assets are not handed directly to the counterparty. They're actually held in a smart contract, which is one of the core primitives that we thought was always the most important for blockchain infrastructure. And we want to open it up to other institutional users, right? Because vaults are getting a lot of attention right now. We're seeing that automated stablecoin strategies may not be the best way to take an approach. So we think active management on chain is really important. Hyperlend is the same thing, where we can basically borrow capital to pay down traditional finance debt, reduce it by 50%, and then open up that same product to other institutional users. So it's permissioned, it's KYC'd, you know exactly who you're borrowing or lending against, and you're able to use that capital both on and off chain. So we think that's going to bring a lot more TVL to Hyperliquid and effectively continue the growth of the ecosystem.
And when you say you can bring like revenue from off chain, can you elaborate? Like, how would that work? How traditional institutions that are usually like they would work with only fiat, right? You know, how would they be part of it?
So the way that we think about it, and that's a really good question, is there's obviously huge benefit to using USDH, for example, for the perpetuals product on Hypercore. And so we expect to see continued growth there. And Hyperion ourselves, we've minted USDH. So we know what that process is like. We test everything, and it's very streamlined. So we can submit fiat, get USDH, use it specifically on the Hyper EVM or Hypercore to support these products, and basically show to other institutions that this is a stablecoin that provides a unique benefit. But also, you can convert it back to fiat and use it in traditional financial systems as well. So that interoperability is really starting to expand, and we think that there's so much of it that is still untapped on Hyperliquid.
And it's backed by $1 to $1.
Exactly, and it's operated by Bridge. Native Markets is officially the team behind it, and so it's using infrastructure that is well known and tested. And as a public company, we go through the KYB AML, W9s, and all that good stuff. So we make sure that it's the real deal.
Yeah, and I want to remind that with your results that coming out, like anticipate profit 4 to 6 million adjusted gross profit in 2026, and it's 4x from 2025 results, like, which is impressive. Like so basically, like quarter to quarter, like what's you're 87% plus, right? Which is probably one of the few exceptions when we look at the 200 plus like DATs in the marketplace, right? And look at their stock performance. If we're going to be completely transparent here, a lot of them are trading below the MNAV. You have diametrically opposite situations. So, do you believe that this trend will only grow, like that your profits will only grow, and you basically outperform, like probably all the debts, or there is some risk that will slow you down?
When we set our goals, everything that we've said we will do so far, we have done. And I think that's really important messaging to the market, is to showcase like we will actually execute. I think crypto is a space that has not seen a lot of that. There's very few teams that have been able to execute at that caliber, Hyperliquid Labs included. And so we really believe in that ethos, and we believe in bringing the ecosystem together, because a lot of these revenue sources are, for example, with Silhouette, they have to bring more volume through their platform, which becomes fee savings, which becomes revenues for both parties. HIP3 with Felix, they have the incentive to continue to bring more volumes, make sure they manage their markets well, and every other team is the same way. And so we're all in the same boat, we all have the same mission, and that's why we believe that it will happen. And by doing so, it is really one tide lifting all boats, and Hyperliquid, and it will become, in our opinion, the blockchain to house all finance.
And as of now, you're holding around $74 million worth of whole gross Hype holdings, right? And if you were to have, obviously we don't have a crystal ball, but if you were to think about the future, what do you think your top performance will be, let's say, in the coming 3 years? Like in terms of the overall treasury and the growth of the company?
So our ambition is to really build out and make all of them robust business lines. So it doesn't just stop at one. They are all infinitely scalable. So our value really comes in our ability to build robust partnerships with the right teams in the ecosystem. So we hope to partner with them for a long time and continue to grow together. So with Hype Asset Use, any counterparty that is using our staked Hype, we expect them to do more and more volumes over time because their products become better. Same with HIP3, Hyper EVM protocols with the lending and the yield vaults. We expect them to also become prominent in the Hyper EVM. And net, we would take those revenues and continue to accumulate Hype and scale those strategies. That's the most effective part about this, is that it really is a DeFi flywheel, and our focus is on running extremely lean and making sure that we are focused on the core mandate, which is how can we return value to our shareholders by accumulating hype and growing the ecosystem and successfully operating that flywheel.
I can tell this is impressive. And I've interviewed people like, Michael Saylor was on my show. I had people who were running Solana DATs, AlphaTon, who were holding Ton, and many others, right? So my question to you would be like, what's the core difference? If you were to explain right now, there's an institution and they say like, they're thinking of diversifying and putting $10 million and they're talking to you, right? And how would you explain your main difference from MicroStrategy? Because that's predominantly what they understand at the first place.
Yeah. Michael Saylor and Strategy have done an incredible job with the financial engineering and optimizing the utilization of the public company engine. And I think that there is still a lot of opportunities to expand upon that. But I guess my personal belief, and having been an investor in Bitcoin, is there isn't that much utility behind it. I think it is an incredibly useful financial primitive. Now it's integrated into Wall Street and other systems, but Hyperliquid has true utility, and it has a buyback mechanism. 99% of the revenues generated on Hyperliquid are going back to purchase the token off the open market. And so that structural composition is so unique. The utility is incredibly unique. And then when I talk to teams that are looking at the space now, there's only a few true experts. I think that a lot of people last summer saw the opportunity of, okay, if I take a public company and use the cash to buy digital assets, the equity goes up. And everyone is having a great time until it reflects the other way. For us, it was always about how can we accumulate what we believe to be the most important asset, build these business lines and scale them. So we have the opportunity to become the first true DeFi company and let it all be on Hyperliquid, which is a very important personal goal of mine.
Yeah, and I would just remind like some of the listeners, if you're new to Hyperliquid, just how impressive the numbers are. Like it's one thing like you can talk about the product, but they made $844 million in revenue just in 2025. That means they were making $116 million per month. In January 2026 alone, $72 million protocol income. Basically, that's 90% from perp trading fees, like most of the usage, as you were talking about it, right? This is the real demand. This is something that the product like is so good that people are using it, and it's very rare when I don't want to trash talk other companies like in crypto, but like it's very rare that the companies really like focusing on revenue. That's why it's so exciting what you're building, because you're building the next layer on top of it, right? However, right? Let's talk about some most conservative players. Let's say pension funds or like other vehicles that will want to have something more, right, on top of it, whether it's insurance or something like closer to the ETF type of product, which they understand better to underwrite with their investors. How would you explain, without the technicalities, why it is a good time to invest in publicly traded company like yours?
Yeah, I would say that we're in the early phases of Hyperliquid gaining mainstream adoption. So with Ethereum and Solana, early ecosystem projects have already kind of reached high valuations, and then they didn't really pay a lot of attention to it, like the value of their tokens. And now we've seen what happens to altcoins generally. I believe in the value of being early to an ecosystem and helping to actively participate in growing it. I've done that with Filecoin. We were very involved in Ethereum, but Hyperliquid is fundamentally different. Like you said, the core team is very high integrity, and they are focused completely on returning value to token holders and to building the best financial products on chain. And so we want to follow that ethos and do just the same. And I would also highlight like Hyperion DeFi, the triple dip thing that we talked about, right? You can buy the base asset, you can get the ETF, hopefully you can get the ETF plus staking. But with Hyperion, we will always, our goal will always be to compound hype at a faster rate and to build those partnerships and embed additional upside optionality for holders. And so when you look at the broad landscape of digital asset strategies today, it's very hard to determine why anyone would buy any of them really, unless they are doing something really unique or contributing to the growth of the ecosystem in a way that is highly revenue generating as well.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, like Hype as a token right now is like it's top 10 right now, which is also a very good indicator like how fast it grew to be in top 10. Historically, it took like layer 1s, layer 2 solutions like 3-4 years. With Hyperliquid, it happened in 2 years. And we're talking about like the market cap of $10 billion, and with a daily organic volume, 253 million per day. And here I want to also draw the line, because my background was also like trading, right? So there's a lot of like another ecosystem, again, not to talk about particular projects, like where we know for a fact that their volume is not fully organic. There's a lot of volumes that are either wash trading or like, painted in a way, and there's a paper like pens. They're not real like organic big volumes. With Hyperliquid, there's, from my understanding, there's not many actual options to even fake the volume. Like everything is like visible, right? The order book, it's not like a dark pool, right? So there's another differentiator. And can you talk a little bit about it, like from a trading perspective? Why is it important to understand the hype itself, like as a token?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there, but really it's the fact that there's opportunities. So we know we've spoken to traders that are arbitraging between CME futures and what's available on HIP3. Cross-venue arbitrage is, that happened with Bitcoin across global exchanges in previous cycles. And so that trend will only continue to accelerate. It creates more liquidity, it creates tighter spreads. And so that's a compounding effect where the markets will just become more and more robust. And so that's the first trend that we're seeing as we talk to these traders. And as they kind of remove those inefficiencies, the market actually improves over time. So there's that component of it. We think that the retail flow is still very organic, and more users are paying attention to that side of things. However, what we really care about is the innovations that come after. So with HIP4 and outcome trading, it actually means that you're able to like hedge Bitcoin or Hype or other digital asset positions using an instrument that does not require funding. So now you're changing the landscape or the dimensions of what it means to actually run financial primitives on Hyperliquid. And we're like really excited to see how that evolves. And of course, it opens the opportunity for prediction markets for other things like political events, pop culture events, sports, and so forth. We don't know what that will look like exactly, but it continues to increase the user and product base of Hyperliquid. And we think that's how it will continue to dominate.
And recently we saw like really impressive numbers, like, the $5.4 billion driven by the surge of interest, as you mentioned, like, commodities, oil, like gold and silver, and people prefer Hyperliquid as opposed to traditional venues. So my question to you, do you think the majority of people who are doing it are only DeFi native, or we're also seeing more surge in traditional traders who are slowly uncovering this opportunity?
Definitely the latter. I've talked to capital allocators, investors, even some that are involved with sovereigns that are in group chats with other macro hedge fund guys, and they're saying, hey, look at this thing is happening over the weekend. Like oil is moving on this venue, Hyperliquid, has substantial volume. We could actually like use these positions. So we have these conversations a lot. We're always trying to understand what works, what doesn't. We like to speak and relay that information to the core team, and we're always focused on how can we improve the product. So it is going to be a paradigm shift. These things take time, but even at Digital Asset Summit, right, Hyperliquid is being discussed. I mean, globally, it is mindshare growing quite a bit.
And in your opinion, I know you're probably not objective in this, but like if you were to put your head like as a person who's like haven't heard about it, like what would be the biggest blockers for a traditional trading firm or market maker or high-frequency trader to start using Hyperliquid?
100%. So for example, we've spoken to RIAs, right? And they're like, we can't just be in the books with unknown counterparties. I think that is a meaningful risk that we are constantly thinking about ways to solve. Maybe it could be whitelisted order books only, or finding some way to implement some KYC. Some of our partners are also exploring options. So given that blockchain is interoperable and composable, I think there are ways to find solutions. But as it exists today, I think for highly regulated players and those that have to know who and what they're trading against, it's going to be an important component of that. So like Hyperliquid Policy Center is obviously working on that as well. And we think that there are still very exciting times to come for, what this evolves into.
And then coming back to where people can participate, like, in Hype, they can buy, crypto exchanges, obviously, but how can they participate in your ecosystem? Because you're a publicly traded company, so obviously they can, accumulate again, even though it's not investment advice, but can you elaborate where you listed and how can people like be part of it?
Yeah, so Hyperion DeFi is NASDAQ listed company. And so, we obviously benefit from capital markets access and being a public company. And one of the things that we're most proud of is that everything we're doing is very transparent. Sometimes I see ourselves like a startup that is just building in public, and we report quarterly, and we're trying to do all the right things all the time. And it's really important to us for us to show what is possible for DeFi. So it does feel good, and also obviously all the challenges of being a pioneer in the space and working on an ecosystem that is still relatively new. But anyway, long-winded way of saying NASDAQ listed, Hype D, HYPD.
Now, in terms of let's say, can I just call my advisor and or someone from Charles Schwab or like Merrill Lynch to directly buy it on Nasdaq?
Yeah, that's correct. And Cantor Fitzgerald is on the ATM. So obviously, for a lot of these digital asset treasury companies, the ATM is an important function of being able to basically draw down equity or pull in cash and accumulate more of the underlying asset. Obviously, Hyperion has a reason to do so. So we're very strategic about that process. And we've actually we've done a lot of block trades. So which means that these institutions or entities speak with Cantor directly, and the cash actually comes directly to Hyperion. So what that means is we're able to deploy strategically into Hype and compound those strategies. And that's something that I think is really an effective flywheel. And as our strategies scale, we expect more of that to happen because investors will realize Hyperion is the best solution for compounding not just Hype, but also growing the ecosystem and getting the value of all that full stack.
Can we talk a little bit about the Inovia? Can you elaborate, how did you pivot from it? What changed? What was the motivator for you?
Yeah, so we completed a $50 million pipe last June, 2025. And Inovia was a company that their previous life sciences business had some struggles and they weren't able to really have a solution. And luckily, I had a background in M&A. I've operationally taken companies, made them a lot leaner, completely shifted the objectives, and we've seen them do very well, right, with Carrier and Otis and United Technologies. So it was a really great opportunity for us, and we got very lucky with our banking partners and our investors and everyone that was involved. We're extremely grateful, and we think things went very well. We announced as part of our most recent earnings that we have signed an LOI to effectively monetize the Optejet, which means that if successfully completed, we will be a full DeFi company, and that will make us very clear in terms of the story to investors. And of course, you have a clear narrative, the right executive team, and of course, the numbers to back it up. I think it's something that is a really, really great opportunity.
Who are your current investors?
So primarily, the entity is one entity. It's called HLIP. They are longtime crypto OGs. I was basically speaking to them a lot in 2024 about Hyperliquid, yelling it from the rooftops, and they listened. They saw the opportunity, and when I basically went to them and said, "Look, with HIP3 and the growth of the Hyper EVM, there's a real opportunity to build something that has long-term value, can build long-term sustainable, scalable infrastructure." And they supported it. So unlike other cap tables for a lot of these other digital asset treasuries, you don't have a bunch of entities in the sidelines just kind of waiting for the shares to register and look for a quick trade. We are all aligned on a long-term mission, and we think that we will be able to do that quite well.
So they're hodlers in a way.
Oh, you bet. They're hodlers, but we're the deployers, so it works out.
Which is great. I think that's a match from heaven, right? And let's talk about the big picture, right? So I mean, certainly you have the conviction, you have 4 to 6 million adjusted gross profit, which is, again, I want to state this is very impressive. Not many. I don't know if you analyze. I didn't have time to analyze all the 200 DATs, but have you ever seen in terms of percentage growth? Have you ever seen these numbers in any other DATs?
To be honest, we don't really look at other ecosystems and what exactly they're reporting. We just focus entirely on our objectives, and that's what we really care about, is how can we continue to do our job well, continue to monetize that, help the ecosystem, and obviously bring more awareness to the efforts of Hyperion and Hyperliquid.
Yeah, because I was looking at I haven't seen such results, which is a good which is good news for you, right? And I was thinking maybe something. Let's talk about the risk management, right? So what can break your model?
So that's really the great thing about having built on-chain, the first of its kind on-chain primitives in previous ecosystems, is we are actually able to pretty much eliminate counterparty risk, especially with the Hype asset use structure. We'll still retain full control of the assets. In things like HIP3 deployers, we still have majority control of the multi-sig. So Hyperliquid has done a good job of building security into their systems, and then we are able to use additional technology, right? Our solutions at Anchorage, hardware wallets. We're very robust on that side. So we want to give our investors comfort that we are always number one priorities, protecting digital assets and making sure that there isn't significant risk to what we are using to build our business. And then outside of that, when we're just talking about broader risk, I think that there's always a chance that Hyperliquid may not be that blockchain that has all finance, but we have still built primitives that have long-term value. I think that's really important. But outside of that, we're seeing the numbers, we're seeing the innovation, and it makes us believe that this is going to happen and the job's still not finished.
I do believe that they're going to grow, but let's talk about from conservative perspective. What happens if for whatever reason, let's say Hype itself and Hyperliquid ecosystem drops for like 50% in like 1 or 2 months, right? Have you looked at the risk management model where it will force you to sell some of the Hype positions?
So, like I said, we focused on building primitives that are agnostic to the price of Hype in crypto markets. So HIP3 is a great example of that. Hype asset use is also a great advantage, where if you see sustained or prolonged market volatility, that is something where market makers will actually participate more if they see opportunities. And those revenues are purely based on volume and fee savings. So dollar-based revenues is something that we will continue to focus on. And then obviously with the yield enhancement or volatility strategies, we can put in hedges at a relatively low cost to cover significant portions of the balance sheet. Obviously, we don't want to be in the market trying to time things or directionally position too much. That's not really our mandate. It's about deployment of the assets, but we do have mechanisms in place, and we're always watching for signs that, if there is risk, we are always focused on mitigating them first and foremost.
So in 3 years, do you see yourself as being like a DeFi Blackstone?
That's a great question. I mean, I think we want to be something more unique. We really want to be a foundational piece of Hyperliquid, because we think so much more of blockchain ecosystems and infrastructure and new financial primitives will continue to come to Hyperliquid. So when that happens and they're looking for lending pools on Hyper EVM or yield enhancement opportunities or liquid staking, those will be our partners. We'll have exposure to our partners. We'll have revenue share deals. And so that is a model that we expect to grow over time. We'll have markets. We'll have the Hype Asset Use service. And so it's really just making sure that we are a pillar that continues to support the growth of the ecosystem and make sure that we're able to monetize and return value. And we think that that's how we all position to win.
And have you ever thought like what happens with competitors landscape? For example, Aster right now, backed by Binance, is also getting some steam. I'm sure there may be like 10 others who are thinking to diversify, and depending on the marketplaces, GMX is also making some moves. Would you ever consider also diversifying into very similar products?
No, and I can say that with certainty. We're fully here to support Hyperliquid. We think that the mechanism they designed to return value to their token holders is unmatched. It would be very hard for protocols that have already launched tokens like GMX to all of a sudden change their model to return value to the token. We've seen Aster and Lighter take really fractional amounts of what Hyperliquid is doing to return value to their token. And if you look at the charts and the trends, it's clear what incentive alignment actually does. And then we think on the other side, right, other incumbents like NYSE and COMEX are also coming to offer 24/7 markets, but we think that actually improves the landscape of everything being financialized, all assets being on chain, and so you'll just be able to cross arbitrage. Markets will always be on, and Hyperliquid will be a foundation part of that.
Oh yeah, as a person who's doing high frequency trading, as you know,
right.
I'm actually very happy about it. I think the more the merrier, and there will be more inefficiencies in a way, and there will be more opportunities to kind of improve these inefficiencies, right? So for sure. And any other thoughts about the high speed perps and dexes? We've seen Evo, Apex Protocol, we've seen Drift and Solana, we've seen Orderly Network, Avantis, maybe some exciting things that you've seen personally that you believe they're gonna become the next contender to help the liquidity.
So what I've actually found, we've had some interesting conversations this week with market makers or hedge funds, institutional players just coming from TradFi, that are actually trying to explore building markets on HIP3 and talking to us about stake. And so now it's okay, what kind of new markets can you create more tied to indices, interest rates, volatility? Like we saw S&P Dow Jones licensed to Hyperliquid as well, right? So there's clearly a new wave coming, and the fact that they want to use Hyperliquid's infrastructure is a very telling sign for us. It's a very significant cosign. And as great as HIP3 and perps and those things are, we're really, really excited actually about HIP4 and what outcome markets will actually do in terms of the landscape of financial activity on Hyperliquid. And we think that should actually be coming in over the next couple of months. And so there's still so much to be done. and Hyperion will be at the forefront of making sure that we innovate in a way that's secure and offers access to retail and institutions.
So is it correct way to think that Hyperliquid is more of a centralized type of experience, but still decentralized, while GMX and Synthetics, they're more like liquidity pool models?
I think that's appropriate. Hyperliquid has solved for, I think, more of like the hybrid model, right? The validator set is smaller. Some people say it's centralized, but really I think it's that kind of who is aligned, will they be there when times get tough, like the Jelly incident and how quickly the validators responded. Those things are a testament to what the Hyperliquid core team has built and what they will continue to build going forward. When you look at some of the Hyper EVM protocols that we work with, right, their ethos is the same. How can we bring value back to the token? And so it gives us more comfort to hold KNTQ and HPL and other tokens, and then they are also looking to create utility around their tokens. So those are the kind of things that maybe nuance or subtleties, but they're really, really important to DeFi builders like us.
How big is your team right now, by the way?
It started with me in terms of like the DeFi side. We were very lucky to hire David Knox, former head of capital markets at PayPal. He's been a huge addition to the team. We recently hired Rob Rubenstein as the general counsel. He was formerly in the gaming and exchange traded derivative space. So we're really rounding out like a regulatory forward, professionalized approach that can bring in traditional finance, right, asset-backed finance, and do it in a way that's built new edge DeFi. And then, of course, we have a lot of the great people from the Inovia team that is also supporting functions like operations and finance. So very happy with how we've operated so far, but we want to continue to just get better.
So in total, how many people?
10.
10.
Yeah.
Which is quite impressive also, like that, like 10 people are running like pretty big operations.
We're actually very fortunate because we have such close partnerships with our counterparties, right? So Kinetic basically built the institutional Hype LST product for us. Hyperlend is working with us to build the private lending pools. Risk added the institutional vault primitive. So they are all extensions of the ecosystem, and we are really privileged to be able to work with them to collaborate and say, these are the things that we need for the institutional side. Let's build it, and they will come.
And I know it's kind of controversial, but I'm still going to ask you, like, do you think there's going to be more DATs on Hyperliquid?
Yeah, we've heard about some in different regions as well. Again, net, I think it's great. It raises more awareness, removes more hype from the supply. I just hope that they're all able to deploy it well and help support the growth of the ecosystem. But Hyperion DeFi plans to be the leader in terms of our ecosystem engagement. And we really want investors and those outside of our crypto bubble to see that and see the asymmetric opportunity and support us in that way, because we will always focus on returning value to the shareholders, returning value to Hyperion, returning value to the ecosystem.
When are you planning to scale to $1 billion?
As soon as we can. Job's not finished. A lot to be done. Once we prove out these infrastructure components, I think that will start to really accelerate our flywheel even further.
Do you see some limits in your capacity to deploy?
In terms of potential counterparties, no. We are really constrained by the amount of hype that we have currently. So we've also looked at asset management models as well, where others that are holding hype that may not know what to do with them, do with the assets, would be able to work with us, and that could also be another vertical for Hyperion. So we actually did that at Dharma, where we deployed Phil for other Filecoin holders. So again, very familiar with all these structures. It's just about like sometimes having enough bandwidth to do all these great things.
But here's the thing, right now, let's say with MicroStrategy, they only hold like 1.2% of the entire like supply of Bitcoin. In your case, let's imagine you're like super successful, right? And you are managing multi-billion-dollar worth of hype, right? Even if at 1 billion, you would basically have 10% of the entire supply, technically, right? You know, if we're looking at the market cap as of now, which means also technically and possibly you can move the price, like, you know. So have you had this conversation with Foundation, like what is the comfortable number that like they will be able to kind of also negotiate before it gets like too centralized, right? Yeah,
that's an important point. We haven't had that conversation. I will say that I did get to meet with the co-founders of Hyperliquid recently, and one thing that I am very proud of when I spoke to Jeff was like, I asked him, he said in a podcast like, oh yeah, I think DAT for Hyperliquid would be valuable. And I asked, what were you thinking when you said that? And he said, it's because hype at that time, last summer, was very hard for people to purchase, right? There was no exchange other than Hyperliquid. And he actually said that what we were doing at Hyperion, he hadn't really thought of, and it was interesting to see the way that we were supporting the growth of the ecosystem and finding ways to generate revenue and actually build a DeFi company out of it. So we didn't talk about what happens when Hyperion eventually owns, let's say, a significant percentage of the supply. But our mandate and our focus will continue to be the same, is that we will find ways to support the growth of the ecosystem, generate revenues from it, and make sure that Hyperliquid is the blockchain to house all of finance.
It's impressive. Let's do also some fun lightning round.
Okay, sounds good.
I mean, you're already replying in such an eloquent way, so with you, I'm not worried about it. So Hype token, undervalued or reflexive narrative?
Undervalued. Job's not finished.
Okay. DeFi monetization, real cash flow or temporary yield illusion?
Real cash flow. More to come.
Public markets, advantage or handicap?
Massive advantage.
If Hive emissions and incentive disappear tomorrow, what percentage of your revenue survives?
A majority.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to specify a percentage?
Yeah. Like we said, right? We think that liquidity is the most important component. So we don't focus on actually hype incentives at all. The staking yield is nice, but as long as we have a way to deploy the assets where they have utility, I don't think that will change. We will be able to generate revenues, and that's really important.
Impressive. Where does the triple dip strategy break under the real stress?
We think the biggest risk there, honestly, is if our partners' platforms or their kind of roadmap doesn't pan out the way that we had envisioned.
Or maybe they're hacked.
Yes, I think that's also another risk. But even if they were to be hacked, we don't have counterparty risk there because we still retain full control of the asset. So that's the most important component to it. But it's, everything with HIP3 or hype asset use is dependent on volume. So if those volumes just aren't where we expect them or plan them to be, that would kind of hinder some of the returns that we're able to generate on the revenue side. But outside of that, there's a large portion that's in our control, and with the Hyper EVM and the volatility strategy. So that's going to be our focus.
So what do you do today that a top quant fund cannot replicate within 6 to 12 months?
I think it is the partnerships. Early mover advantage, like we said, the ecosystem rewards, effectively the airdrops, are a limited opportunity. And so Kinetic had their first airdrop. That's not happening again. The second is ongoing right now, so you have to be using it. We're always looking for the next one. So those are things that you have to really be organic and native to the ecosystem and work with people. So you can't just do it on an island.
And also have relationship to know when it's happening.
Of course.
Are you generating true alpha or just packaging ecosystem beta more efficiently?
We view it as alpha, for sure. Other DATs can't do this in this ecosystem or in other ecosystems because of the nature of the digital asset. And then ETS won't be able to actually participate in the ecosystem, right? So only HypeD is the true DeFi company for Hyperliquid.
If Hyperliquid loses dominance, what happens to Hyperion entire model?
We'll work to make sure that doesn't happen. And we'll continue to support Hyperliquid in that way because it is through our own volition and our efforts that we are able to ensure that Hyperliquid wins. And we believe that it's just at the beginning phases. One
thing that everyone misunderstands about DeFi.
Oh, that's a good question. Dang it, I didn't want to get stumped. That I guess it's too late, or that they missed it, or something is it's already a gone opportunity. I think DeFi is just starting. It's happening now, and we think that it's going to be on Hyperliquid. So there's your opportunity. Whether you want to invest in Hype or invest in the tokens or build something yourself, those are all opportunities that are still in the early phases.
Beautiful. Well, there's also one question which I ask always, but I never notify my guests about it. It's a personal question to you, right? And you're a tremendous founder. You're successful, but there is also a meaning behind it, right? So my question to you is, what is the meaning of life to you, Hyunsu?
Wow. I guess for me, it has always been, I said in the beginning, I was able to do a really important role in M&A. I got to basically lead a lot of the digital efforts at Dharma. And so it was about others giving opportunities and receiving opportunities and really taking that to the top level that I could. And so for me, the meaning is being able to kind of give those opportunities back to people while continuing to do it myself. And so we kind of see that with the ecosystem teams that we're building with. Believe it or not, I think the founders of the majority of the protocols I work with are younger than me. And so it's really great to be able to advise and share our experiences and say, this is why you can position to become the winning protocol in this ecosystem. And our goal is to kind of make that happen. And so that would bring a lot of meaning to me. And so it's about helping other people and completing an objective together.
That's great. Maybe you want to share one book or a movie that changed your life.
Oh, these are questions. I'm kind of lame because I've only been thinking about Hyperliquid stuff and Hyperion stuff.
Which is great. That means it's a very honest answer.
One movie that changed my life. My favorite movie is Forrest Gump. And I think that there's a lot of beauty to the serendipity of life, but also in many ways it's synchronicity. So if you believe so much that something can happen and you act towards it, in many ways, it also kind of comes to you. And we've had that happen a lot of times with how fortunate we've been with teams that we've worked with and teams that we hope to continue to work with. And we think that we are in the right place in the right time for Hyperliquid. And that's really, really important.
Maybe a favorite book instead of like just saying change your life, maybe just something that you would reread multiple times.
So this is only because I've been reading it recently. Sovereign Individual, I think, is incredibly important. Probably one of my most favorite books. And really ahead of its time, right, for how the world has come to where it is today. But I also received this book, The New CEO. And it was like one of those things where one of the companies sends it to you. And sometimes I still don't think about the fact that, I guess, I'm working to run a public company. But it is helpful because, it shows you like, it actually helps me understand the challenges that we go through and how important this is, and to speak to the message and the objectives and to fulfill them. And so it's been a really, really great learning process. And I'm so fortunate to be able to be here and do this.
Where can people find you? Where do you spend your time? Or LinkedIn, Twitter?
Yes. So David Knox, our CFO, is the LinkedIn guy. So he's the one to follow there. Hyperion DeFi is on LinkedIn. We're on X at Hyperion DeFi. We're also on Instagram now too, just to get with the cool kids. And I'm on X. It's Hyunsu Jung _. So, but mostly follow our main accounts. That's where all the good stuff comes from.
Incredible. Look, I am really impressed. How eloquent are you, and your vision, how passionate are you in what you're achieving. I think what you've done so far, I spoke to a lot of veterans who are always talking about how hard it is to even run a publicly traded company. And some people in average, they come to this after their 40s actually. In your case, you're young, you're successful, you're ambitious, right? And you already have incredible track record and one of the most successful, DATs in the industry. I wish you success. I wish you even more growth, right? And now I think if you're not convinced after this interview about at least participating in the Hyperliquid ecosystem and specifically look into Hyperion DeFi, I don't know what else you should do. So really impressive start what you've done, and I sincerely wish you even more success.
Thank you so much. And thank you guys for having me.
Thank you.